Hey, this is Rob, and you are listening to the second installment of Saddle Time Philosophy. I tried out multiple different microphones, and the Rode microphones is still the winner. The audio quality is much better, modulo the occasional undiagnosed bug in these, which is like that sort of staticky nonsense that we were hearing in past episodes. So if that interferes, I apologize. Hopefully the audio quality is good enough because I am not on a roadway and I'm on a rail trail, so there's going to be some gravel and leaves. But no passing cars. If there's a passing car, that'd be quite bad on this rail trail. But a lot of leaves. So let's give it a shot. Okay, so the topic I would like to unpack today is the concept of empathy. Empathy is a very interesting term. A lot of people mistaken it for taking on the emotions of others. And Paul Bloom has done some interesting work. He wrote a book, I believe it's called On Empathy, worth checking out. And he talks about two forms of empathy. Cognitive empathy and psychological empathy. Emotional empathy. Cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. Now, a lot of people, when they think of empathy, they think of emotional empathy. And the concept that he sort of advises emotional empathy as a bit deleterious insofar as emotional empathy is draining. It sort of makes you worse off in the end, and that's sort of when you take on the emotions of others in a sense where then you feel the emotions. So if you were to talk to somebody about maybe the death of their parent, or maybe the loss of a job, you would then be burdened with those emotions. And that's not an ideal form of empathy. Whereas cognitive empathy is a form of empathy that effectively allows you to empathize in not a detached way, but in a constructive way. And that's a little bit more complicated, and I guess that's sort of the concept that I'll be unpacking. So when I talk about empathy in this installment of Saddle Time Philosophy, it will be from the perspective of the cognitive form. So let's do it. The reason I chose to dissect this philosophical term is one of the sort of surprising outcomes of the 2+ months I've been on the road has been this insane increase in empathy that I've noticed. And that kind of came as a shock to me, because I was not expecting that to be such a noticeable effect of bike touring. And I think there's several reasons why that is. And I'm going to get into those. But I also want to get into how folks can improve their empathy, different tactics and techniques to become more cognitively empathetic towards others. Thank you. Bicycle passing here. And so I boil this down to like, so why, the question is why has this bike tour enhanced empathy in my own life in such a way? And now I will say, like, prior to going on the bike tour, part of my meditation practice is occasionally I will do meditations called metta, which that's a Pali term for loving kindness, which is one direct method of enhancing empathy. So if anybody's interested in that, they can look into Sharon Salzberg. She wrote a lot of books on loving kindness meditation, and it's incredibly powerful. I won't get into sort of the details in earnest here, but effectively you use different somewhat contrived methods. Not contrived is a negative word, but like you're conjuring thoughts of others in a sense and wishing them well and sending them loving kindness. So if you occasionally, you can try this right now, sit down for 5 minutes and just wish somebody well. Pick somebody that you don't have a complicated relationship with, and just wish them the best. Say, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be free from suffering. And the aim there is to embody and just fully feel those fully embrace and embody those wishes for somebody else and really feel it. So that's one modality, very powerful modality for enhancing empathy. But I'm gonna speak in terms of the bike tour and sort of I think what elements of the tour enhanced my own empathy even more. So sorry, crossing the road up here. It's nice when I'm at a loss for what I want to say next. I can just blame it on the environmental conditions because I'm riding my bike. So one of the things after getting laid off in May that I was interested in pursuing was to work the other side of my brain. After the last 2 years of my job, I became so left hemisphere dominant through writing code and through very stale and artificial daily activities. Not that all engineering work is gonna preclude you from being empathetic, but I was interested in pursuing sort of more right hemisphere, and that's the work of Ian McGilchrist, The Divided Brain. It's a great book talking about the division between the right and left hemisphere. We'll not get into that, but I was interested in sort of improving social skills, building more connection, and like using this bike tour as a means of just overall enhancing my ability to engage with others and put myself out there in a social context, which bike touring is fantastic for that. So I read or listened to the audio book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is great. It's actually, even if you're not looking to pursue the knowledge from that book like a business sense or like a sales sense, there's a lot of really, really powerful takeaways from it. So that was sort of the foundation upon which I embarked on this trip. And that definitely enhanced, there's a lot of recommendations in that book about how to like engage in good conversations with other people and be a good listener and that sort of thing. And throughout my travels, I was, as the one episode with the patron at the Tippecanoe highlighted, I wanted to practice a lot of those techniques, and they are incredibly powerful. That's why that book is still so popular. So, but the other aspect of the trip that enhanced cognitive empathy for me was my warm shower stays. And it was just the exposure, the real intimate exposure with other people. So staying in their homes, listening to their stories, and just, I think travel's great, but you can also travel in a pretty isolated fashion, where you stay in hotels and you're just sort of doing your own thing, and that's not what I was afraid this bike tour would become, was just sort of a grind from point A to point B, and not taking the time to engage with the world around me. So isolation, and isolation's, I would say, equivalent to ignorance in a sense. So, and that explains a lot of, rural communities, not to knock on rural communities, but like, if you're not putting yourself out in the world and engaging in a meaningful way with other people, that can be somewhat of a driver for ignorance. And so that was probably one of the most powerful elements of this trip that led to an overall enhancement of empathy, to the point where, like, somebody's telling me a story and I'm listening and I'm feeling emotions, I'm feeling it on a deeper level than I am accustomed to. It's very strange, but I'll give one story that I told Claire last night. I was at Trailhead Bike Shop in Ludington, Michigan, and there was a plate of oatmeal raisin cookies behind the woman at the sales desk, and I was like, "Oh, you got some cookies?" Like, just kind of making conversation. And I was like, "Oh, those look good." She's like, "Oh, you want some?" She's like, "One of our customers, older gentleman, his wife recently passed away, and every Thursday he bakes cookies for everyone around the town. He spends a whole day baking cookies for everyone around the town and drops them off at local establishments, at the bike shop, the police station, library, whatever else. And I felt that on a level that was just, I guess, I'm not sure if it was because I was relating to that man in a sense, in a different way, but I walked away from that conversation recognizing how deeply I felt that story. And yeah, that was sort of the aha moment. I was like, okay, this trip definitely did something. So I would say, when you travel, engaging with as many folks as possible and really putting yourself out there in terms of being vulnerable and searching intimate connection. So whether that's through just like warm conversation with people that you meet, or whatever it may be, just making sure you're taking the time to expose yourself to as many people as possible and to have meaningful interactions with as many people as possible. So in warm showers was an amazing way to do that. And again, for anybody who doesn't know what Warm Showers is a not-for-profit organization where bicycle tourists will host other bicycle tourists that are traveling. So for non-cyclists listening, there's similar organizations like couch surfing is probably the most similar. So warm showers definitely was one. The other sort of interesting element of the tour that I would say enhanced cognitive empathy in sort of a weird tangential indirect way would be challenge and danger. Now those seem sort of agnostic to cognitive empathy in a sense. However, bump. Jeez, this rail trail. It's paved now, so maybe that's better audio. I noticed that, so today, for instance, I don't want to scare people, especially family listening, but there were chunks of today's route that were not safe, and both dangerous and challenging. I had 5 hours on this highway that was horrible into a headwind, and it was uphill. So that's what I'm coming down from right now. And I notice after days like that, there's this sense that, I guess Sebastian Junger, great individual, he's a journalist and he writes about danger and sort of the strangely, what would you say? The sort of profound effects of putting yourself in dangerous situations, and how, there may be a net benefit, assuming you don't die, for exposing yourself voluntarily to sort of risky situations. And I've noticed that several things happen after a very more nerve-wracking day on the bike, is that it's strangely more meaningful, and I think it's my gratitude for life has been magnified in a sense, and I do think that translates into empathy. So that's maybe just a personal thing, but what I like, my engagements with others after the fact is deeper, because maybe it exposes, I'm literally unpacking this idea in real time because I really don't understand it, but it could be something like your investigation of mortality, of your own mortality, and sort of the looking even through binoculars at death in, sorry, crossing the road here, looking at, oh, passing someone here. Hello. Like looking at your own sort of mortality, and there's other methods for doing that. There's Stoicism, different meditations. The Tibetans recommend contemplating death 5 times a day because it overall enhances well-being. On your left. And there's a profound sense of, ironically, when you contemplate your own mortality and you're grateful for being alive, it conjures feelings of goodwill and overall positivity, strangely enough. So give that a shot. So yeah, those are the sort of elements. And then there's challenge, which I talked about, where I find pushing my own limits, I don't know, that could honestly be the dopaminergic effects of endorphins. But thank you. Hey, passing some more folks here. That could be the endorphins, but doing challenging things on a daily basis, I find to also just have a knock-on effect of empathy. Actually, in Born to Run, Patrick McDougall talks about how runners tend to be like very open, sociable, kind people when they're running for the love of running. So like when they're really like a Courtney Dauwalter, where she just loves to run and she's like the friendliest person you'll ever meet. So there is this interesting relationship between like the genuine deep love of endurance sports and just being a kind, empathetic person. So that's another interesting area to explore for enhancing overall empathy. So yeah, those are sort of the philosophical concepts within cognitive empathy that I wanted to unpack. Again, as you know, I get towards the end of this bike tour, I really hope to continue practicing a lot of these things. More the first one, the warm showers. I don't want to go out for a 5 mile or a 5 hour ride on a sketchy highway just because, you know, there may be some good to come out of it. I'd like to avoid sketchy highways at all costs. However, when you're trying to get your way across Michigan, and that's the only route, well, you do it. So, and actually, on that topic, one of the things that I spoke with my buddy Chris McKay, shout out to Chris and Tori, love you guys. See, I'm like starting to almost well up. What the? I don't know. it's weird. But love both of them. They're great humans. And I remember talking to Chris, I think it was, I forgot when it was. Well, it's probably when I saw them back in whatever the hell state that was. Feels like ages ago. That, you know, so this route had this weird, not weird at all. This route had a patchwork of both rail trail and dirt, you know, rural dirt roads and highways, and I always found after a day where there was some level of risk that I was assuming to meet my goal, like the day was more fulfilling. Whereas like there were several days where I was just riding rail trail and it was nice. It was very pleasant. It was peaceful and calm, but after, you know, all things being equal, a day riding on a rail trail versus on a more challenging, dangerous route, the sense of meaning that I derived from that sort of was much greater on the day of the challenge and danger. So Sebastian Junger is an interesting person to look into on that topic. There's definitely some interesting research behind why that's the case. Now I'm kind of getting off the topic of empathy, but that's okay, because this is interesting. One of the concepts that he talks about is how Israel is like how tight-knit communities are often formed during times of conflict. And he cites Israel as an interesting example of that because they're constantly in a state of conflict, and so is Palestine. And how sometimes, this is weird, but sometimes after times of intense conflict or wartime, people almost long for those days. And I think that's because, well, he postulates that's because when times are challenging and you're sort of interfacing with your own mortality, there's this, it breeds solidarity with other folks. And I think like the military is an interesting example of that as well, where like, you know, a lot of Marines will say that after coming home from war, they just build these unforgettable attachments and relationships with other people. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure, right? So, you know, you got to modulate your own sort of propensity to assume risk, but I definitely assumed a fair amount of risk in danger in this trip. Today was a great example. You know, I'm hesitant to say this because I know like Claire and my dad and like other folks are listening, and Mama Kay, but you know, I was on the highway for like 5 hours and I had like a foot of shoulder, terrible shoulder, and I had trucks, semis just blowing past me while I was grinding into a headwind uphill. So yeah, that I don't know, something about those experiences that create meaning insofar as I'm pursuing a goal right? So the goal is to get to Port Huron today, and that ends up just, when I'm done with this ride, I'm gonna see my dad, and I don't know. The sense of meaning and fulfillment, I think, will be much greater. Well, I know it will be much greater just from experience. So I'm going to end it here because there is a gas station that I'm going to get some water at. And there's a busy street up here that I'm going to cross. So, and it's about a half hour, so that's great. But yeah, so from whatever town I just ended up in, on whatever rail trail outside of Port Huron that I'm riding in on, I don't really know where I am, and I hope I'm still en route. Ta-ta for now.